Brian, are we... Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started. We have an online audience here as well, joining on the TorontoStar.com at thestar.com. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. Okay. Thank you, Marshall, for teaching me that. Hello, and welcome to the TMU Democracy Forum, hosted by Deus Senior Fellow and Toronto Star political columnist Martin Regg Cohn. I'm Kareem Bardisi, and I'm the Executive Director of the Deus, a policy and leadership think tank here at Toronto Metropolitan University. Welcome to those who are joining online at thestar.com and later on CPAC. We're all in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. And as you probably know, subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, then Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Now, November 4th to 8th is Indigenous Education Week at TMU, and one of the activities I'll be attending is the unveiling of the wampum belts that TMU has through its library collection. That's on Monday, November 4th, 1:30 p.m. at the Catalyst at the Rogers Communications Center, 80 Gould Street, just a bit north of here. Just around 1 year ago, we were privileged to host Mayor Olivia Chow at the forum, at the TMU Democracy Forum. And in that conversation, she referred repeatedly to her mentor and mine, Marshall Ganz. And I've been waiting 16 years to be able to welcome Marshall to my community. The Deus would not exist in the way it does without Marshall. When I made the choice to walk into his class, Public Narrative, Self, Us, and Now, one sunny day in Cambridge, Massachusetts, 18 years and 2 months ago, I was changed. I found my people. I connected my purpose and the stories and the techniques that were maybe there, but that I hadn't discovered, I hadn't uncovered, I hadn't let my right brain access, that I hadn't discovered to help make the change that I wanted to make in the world. And part of that change brought me here to the Deus, and actually to this Deus. And I'm thrilled that we'll have Marshall in conversation with Mayor Chow and Martin. Just a few housekeeping tips. This event is also our inaugural Deus Book Talk. And Marshall's new book, People, Power, Change, Organizing for Democratic Renewal, will be available for sale after the event. And Marshall has been working hard to sign copies of that book. You'll also note that there are questions that you can ask on Slido, the way we ask you to ask questions that Martin will put to the guests is on the Slido app, and so there's the information there. We have also like to encourage you to donate to help defray the costs of this event. As you know, we put on the TMU Democracy Forum for free for our community, but there are costs associated with it, and there are slides as well as information on deus.ca on how to donate to help us defray the costs of this event. For those of you who have registered for the Leadership Development Workshop with Marshall, that will start at 2 p.m. after a break. Thank you. Welcome, and take it away, Martin.
Thank you. Bienvenue, bonjour. Welcome to our 34th Democracy Forum at Toronto Met, where we try to do democracy differently. And today, we're going to mix it up a bit. We have 2 guests who play very different democratic roles. One is an active politician. The other is an activist, organizer, and educator. Different backgrounds, but a deep bond. And I think that's the theme today for both of them, is that democracy is all about relationships. So let me tell you about our 2 guests and what brought them together. Now, Marshall Ganz teaches leadership, organizing, and civil society at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. He also works with the leading Change Network and other grassroots organizations around the world. He was a labor organizer with the United Farm Workers and later worked on the campaigns of Jerry Brown and Barack Obama. Now, he got his start in the civil rights movement, got a bit carried away with it. At the time, he was a student at Harvard in the 1960s, but he decided he needed to continue on to save democracy, and so he didn't just take a gap year, he had a 28-year gap. before he went back to Harvard to finish his studies. He got a BA in history and government, and back on campus, he couldn't stop studying. He got his master's in public administration from the Kennedy School, PhD in sociology, and he's still on campus, not just as an organizer, but as an educator. Now, he has published widely, but his latest book sums it all up: People, Power, Change, Organizing for Democratic Renewal. Buy the book, but first, please welcome Marshall to Toronto Met. And please give our next guest an equal round of applause when it's her turn. Olivia Chow was elected as Toronto's mayor last year. She was previously the Member of Parliament for Trinity-Spadina. And before that, she served as a Metro Toronto councillor and a school trustee. Before politics, she was a sculptor and a community organizer. After a lifetime in politics, she ended up here at Toronto Met as a distinguished visiting professor, which is how we met. Now, inspired by what she learned at Harvard, she founded the Institute for Change Leaders, teaching a new generation of activists and organizers. And way back as a student, I always like to tell people what folks studied. She majored in religion and philosophy at U of T. That's not all. She also studied fine art at OCAD, and her BA is from Guelph. So not a gap year, but a lot of moving around and a lot of diversity of ideas. One of her first decisions as mayor, and a very wise move, was to come to the Democracy Forum exactly 1 year ago today. We're glad to have her back. Welcome back to Toronto Met. First, some housekeeping to follow up on Kareem's housekeeping. I always remind people this is not a news conference or a confrontation. It's a democracy forum where we try to dig a little deeper and get deeper answers from our guests. So no talking points allowed today. A reminder to everyone in the audience, when you registered and again when you checked in, you agreed to abide by our code of conduct on campus. You get to ask questions, but you let our guests answer the questions. That's how we roll in a democracy forum. I'll kick off the questioning, and then we'll open it up to the audience later on. There's no live mics today. There is, as Kareem was saying, the Slido app, so no lineups. We love Slido. It's very democratic, so you just use your phones to log in and start thinking up your questions now. I'm going to sit down in a sec, but I'm first going to fire off the first question, and protocol demands, Marshall, that we begin with Her Worship, the Mayor. But don't worry, it's going to be all about you. So when we had Olivia on last year, my first question was, how did you win the election, the mayoral election just a few months earlier? And she started off by talking about how she lost the one before and how she talked to you about it. So Olivia, can you just recap that story for people on stage of meeting Marshall in Halifax, moaning about your loss and how he tried to cheer you up by telling you it's a good thing?
Hey, once an organizer, always an organizer. There are 4 or 5 seats that are
Yes.
vacant here. Come sit down, because I see people standing. No need to stand. There is quite a few seats here, you know? Just come on over, come on up. I don't bite yet. Oh, okay. Not you anyway. You know, when I look at that photo, I was looking a bit lost over there, and there's this smiling man. So I thought, you know, I said, I'm no longer a member of parliament, and yeah, I lost the election. What am I going to do next? So I called up that smiling man and said, hey, what do I do now? He said, well, the best teacher is through failure. Excuse me? I just failed miserably. Losing election is pretty devastating. Because I haven't lost before. Well, I lost the election, but I never lost an office, right? So, and yes,
because you did. I hate to remind you of this, but you reminded us last year you lost twice when you ran
That's
for
right,
Parliament.
2014, 2015, 2 in a row, my
And I
God.
say that not to torment you, but I admire politicians from all parties who are willing to put it all on the line. It's a special talent that I don't have.
That's good.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, okay, and Marshall said, Professor Ganz said, come come down. I said, okay. I've actually visited Professor Ganz in Harvard after 2009 because he came and made an incredible speech in Halifax, and I went and learned some of his narrative and started practicing it when I was a member of parliament, persuaded my late husband, Jack Layton, to bring his trainers up to train the NDP caucus, and I thought, okay, that's why I called him up, and sure enough, I took the course and then learned how to teach from the best, of course, and then the other thing about that he said is the best way to learn is to teach. I thought, aha. I came from a teaching background from my parents were both teachers. I taught English as second language, heritage language. I taught college, race, class, and gender. So I've taught 6 or 7 years here, there, and everywhere. And I thought, okay, it's about organizing. It's about storytelling. And the difference, let me tell you, between 2014, where I was reading, you know, some speech that was written to me backwards. Ganz' new book is a master class, versus being able to tell my story. And then I was able to connect in 2023, and here I am, your mayor. So that is what happened.
Just one quick follow-up, Marshall, to Olivia. You said at the time, it's not, there's a reason we say hearts and minds. We don't say minds and hearts. So emotion and connection is part of it. Why was that so important for you?
I used to debate about number of homeless people. 1 in 10 people right now use the food bank. You can have all the facts in the world and win the argument if you don't touch their hearts, if it's not through a story. Marshall will say that we're hardwired to learn from stories, all that, I'll leave that. But if you don't touch the heart, the hands will not come out. And the only way you can connect in a democratic society to get people to come and vote, to get people to come out to take action, to make change, to put themselves on the line, to be vulnerable, to take the courage to make a difference, to connect, and spend a lot of time and money to connect with other people, to form a movement, and all those things until you answer the question of why you're doing it, until you are able to say it and be a bit vulnerable to do it. You are not going to touch anyone, which means that you are not genuine. No one would know who they're voting for, and no one would know how to follow you into building a democratic or social movement. So touching the head and the heart, and that's when the hand comes out, and that's how you build the movement. This is how, in politics, you get people to come out to vote for you, right? That's important, or to volunteer for you.
Marshall, we made you wait, but you got not just a glowing introduction, but a testimonial.
Yeah, that's great. That's unusual.
To set the stage. And so, look, whenever authors like to tell their own stories, you talk a lot about storytelling. So tell us, set the stage for us, set the table for today. Tell us why you wrote the book. Tell us the takeaway.
Well, I mean,
tough question.
Yeah. Well, first, good afternoon. Let's try it again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. It's got to be a conversation, not just like a lecture. And I also just want to say what a privilege it is to have this opportunity see, the thing about teaching is you get to take credit for successful former students and avoid blame for those. No, but really, Olivia, it's just such a privilege to be here with you and have this conversation, and celebrate really the work that you've been doing. I did want to ask, is there anybody here who has been a student of mine online or offline?
Oh.
Okay, that's cool.
It's a tough crowd.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I'm going to ask one more question. I was sent to Toronto in 1968 when I was working for the farm workers, and we were boycotting California grapes because we had a grape strike. It turned out Toronto was the third largest grape market in North America. Wow. Who knew that? Okay, so my job was to persuade Canadians to stop buying California grapes. So I was here from 68 to 70, 73 to 75. And I have to say, Toronto was absolutely one of the most effective cities where we got the supermarkets, we got Dominion, Steinberg's, to stop buying California grapes. And we actually had a button, "This Canadian Cares," and it had a little maple leaf on it. But for me,
You're making me feel nostalgic when you say Dominion. I worked at Dominion in my
yeah, I'm glad you survived, yeah. But
Marshall, tell us about the book.
Yeah, no, I get there. Because what I want to say that relates to the book is I had an opportunity to learn here about how politics could work, about how unions could work, very different than what my experience had been in the United States. And it's one of the reasons that I stuck with labor movement and one of the reasons I stuck with organizing. So I'm really grateful. And I wonder if there's any folks here who remember the Great Boycott. Oh, look at this.
I photographed it.
Oh, you photographed it. All right, cool.
For you, for the farm workers.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, the bug.
It was great.
So it sort of feels like homecoming in a very real way. Okay, the book. Well, Tom Hayden, a friend of mine who passed away, but he used to say that change is slow except when it's fast. And we're living in a fast moment. That's not news to anybody. It's a moment of radical uncertainty. And the thing with radical uncertainty is it can be seen as a source of threat and fear, or it can be seen as a source of opportunity and hope. It really depends on how we see what we see in it, because our choices really matter in times like this. They have real consequence because of all the uncertainty, and they have outcomes. So that's certainly one of the motivations for doing this. The second is that our politics, public life, so much of it has been profoundly dehumanized, especially in the United States, where people get turned into data points, people get turned into labels, and the humanity that's at the core of politics gets lost. Because really, it's about people, and it's about how people engage with other people. And when we have these structures that force us into these utterly individualistic, depersonalized kinds of data points, we begin to lose the human dimension of politics, which is what politics is fundamentally about. And so having had the opportunity to learn with so many people over the years, because teaching for me was a way to connect my life experience with the social science I was learning in a pedagogical conversation with the rising generation. It was kind of like, you have to go to class twice a week, have a conversation with the future. I mean, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's very generative. And then the online work we've been doing has brought us into conversation with folks all over the world. And so it seems like a critically important time to reclaim people-based politics, not as instruments, not as resources, not as transactions, but in relationship to one another around shared commitments from which we can learn, we can grow, and we can build real power. So that's why.
So we'll circle back. There's lots to unpack there. We have a bit of time. Both of you left some interesting clues. Olivia, you mentioned homelessness. We'll circle back to that in a minute or a few minutes. And Marshall, you talked about digital and the world that's changing, and I want to come back to that in a bit too. Can I just ask you, though, we have, in a way, Olivia, in her success, is a proof point, Exhibit A, for methods that you both share and teach and believe in. What did she do right in bringing theory into practice, and what did she forget?
Okay, I've got a pretty simple answer. She won.
You sound a bit like...
That's what she did right.
You sound a bit like James Carville there for a moment. But,
yeah.
But, fair enough.
But see, the thing people want to, it's like success, or I should say effectiveness, is measured by effectiveness. It's measured by, too often we focus in so much of the advocacy work on inputs but not outputs. You know, so many phone calls, so many letters, so many of this, so many, but their inputs disconnected from outputs. There's no in-between theory of change or connection. In class, I have this cartoon from the New Yorker. It's a bunch of there's some professors at a blackboard and a bunch of formulas. And over here's a bunch of formulas. And over here's a bunch of formulas. In between it says, and a miracle happened. See, that's the problem.
Yeah, and metrics are great unless you don't know what you're measuring.
Yeah, no kidding. So, no, I'm quite serious about that.
Yeah.
Because how you win really does matter. Because in organizing, we're looking not just win-lose. We're also looking, do you come out of this stronger than you went into it? And so I don't know if you've had the experience of maybe succeeding at a project and a campaign, and you never want to ever see anybody again who was involved. Yes, sound familiar? Well, see, what did you build? You didn't build anything. In fact, you may have come out of it weaker than you went into it. So winning the thing is part of it, but coming out of it stronger is even more important. And that's what brings it back to organizing and brings it back to developing leadership, building capacity, so that it is a step toward dealing with the really big problems that we need to deal with. And the last element of outcome is developing leadership, because it takes leadership to develop movements and do civic work. And you can structure things so that there's one leader and everybody else is helpers, or you can construct things so that leadership is distributed and collaborative. On the second one, you build leadership, and that's how you build growth. It's how you build capacity. On the first one, there's a saying in Spanish.
There's a lot of Spanish in the book, I'm just warning.
Yeah. Well, I learned a lot of my stuff in the Mexican world, especially in California. Entre menos burros, más elotes. That means the fewer the donkeys, the more the corn. And too often, folks in leadership positions don't want any other donkeys sharing the corn. And so
I think that's one of the takeaways of the book. When people talk so much in democracy, but also on campuses about leadership, and it's not one person. It's about distributed leadership, as you put it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about what's on people's minds, not just today, but for the next 11 days. We've talked about Olivia's leader election, and she won. That's important, you just said. What's happening in your country? Why?
that's why I'm here.
But my question is, that's not a fair question. That's a trick question. And my real question is, how's Kamala doing? And why isn't she doing better? That's a serious question.
Well, it is a serious question, and it requires a really thoughtful answer. I think many people do not appreciate the institutional constructs in our Constitution that are fundamentally anti-democratic. The Electoral College there's nothing democratic about it. The Senate, there's nothing democratic about that. The way we do districts, where incumbents decide on the district.
Gerrymandering, a word you never hear in Canada, rarely anyway.
Yeah, and it's named for a governor of Massachusetts, Mr. Derry, who did the mandering. But that was when it came
I didn't know that.
No, so there are all these constitutional constraints that really warp the democratic character of American politics.
Okay, but Barack Obama overcame them, and Joe Biden overcame them. Why is Kamala Harris not yet? We'll see. I mean, the polls may be misleading, but it's awfully close.
Okay, and I would say the other reason is that, the way that money has dehumanized politics in the U.S. especially, it's not where it comes from. It's the fact that there is no constraint. The Supreme Court said that money is speech. That meant it created infinite demand. That created this political marketing industry that seizes control of the whole political process and turns it into marketing and turns it into fragmentation rather than the other.
But we both know is that the Democrats have a lot of money. They're raising money a lot faster than Donald Trump right now.
See, it's not how much money, it's what's done with it is to build an industry that makes more money the more money is spent. And they do that by controlling technology that they can use. And so you get sound bites, you get this incredible investment in advertising. It's all up here, it's all an air game. It's not people engaging with other people and doing politics in a meaningful way. Now, we had a chance to do that in the Obama campaign. It was really exceptional that we had that opportunity. Unfortunately, he didn't take advantage of it. And that, to win, yes, but then for subsequent governance, it became secondary, and it was put aside. So we're dealing with the situation, and Hillary's campaign did nothing to build capacity. And so we're looking at a situation in which there's this radically underdeveloped civic capacity, civic infrastructure, and that makes the politics very volatile.
Just
very volatile.
briefly tell us, because everyone talks about this all the time, your quick take, why is Donald Trump doing so incredibly well? I mean, if you think about, there's always outliers, and there's always people who have different ideas of how democracy works, but he's at anywhere from 44 to 48%. I mean, I used to track how many people believed Elvis Presley was still alive, and it never hit more than 12%. And it's been going down since because he's been dead for a long time. But Donald Trump is alive and well. Why? I don't mean him, but the voters.
Yeah, I was going to say, alive, well, I'm not sure about that. No, he has an impulse control problem, but putting that aside, it goes to the volatility, the lack of embeddedness in political understanding, practice, community, and all of that. And so it makes things very thin and volatile. Now, with Trump, though, there is a dark side to American politics that's been there since the very beginning, called slavery, and everything that followed subsequently. In Mississippi, I saw Donald Trump's. I mean, that's what was there. So there is that dark side. I mean, the problem of trying to create a state that's half slave and half free, that leaves a profound legacy of institutionalized racism that is really difficult. So that's there. I think the fact that since the 70s or 80s, democratic politics, democratic parties generally, abandoned their egalitarian commitments to the people who work, to the people who live ordinary lives, and got obsessed by this whole, it goes by the name globalization, but that's not really the problem. The problem is it places profits over people systematically and reinforces that. I mean, you know, when we had our crash in 2008, and so forth, you know, people lost jobs. I mean, that was people got thrown out of houses. Hey, the bankers were doing fine, thank you very much, and they were responsible for it.
And that left an opening for the
A
Republicans.
huge opening, because then here you are, nobody's seeing you, nobody's on your side, you're not even visible, you're made invisible. And you know, we, as humans, we need to be seen. So we need to have respect, and we need to be able to fulfill our roles, and it creates a huge vacuum.
So let me ask you, though, about how to make sense of that. You're all about hope, not just hope, but Obama was about the audacity of hope.
Yep.
But in your book, I've read the book, I see Olivia's trying to see where my little cheat marks are for where you're trying to figure out what I underlined.
Actually, read the book is a big thing.
No, but Olivia's trying to reverse engineer what I underlined and read and my margin comments. But you also believe in mixing up anger and agitation and action, right? It's not just about talk and hope and kumbaya. You write in the book, when anger combines with hope, it can become a source of courage. Now, Trump is all about, I will say, anger and fear and hate.
That's right.
But it's working for him, isn't it?
It's working for him. See, this is yes, I can, not yes, we can. And when you mobilize around fear, you take away people's agency because you place responsibility for their plight on others. So then others become those responsible, and they're the enemy. And in me, because I'm your avatar. I see you, I get you. It's classic fascism, it's classic authoritarianism. And so what you do, you create dependency, not autonomy, and not engagement, no agency. When you mobilize around hope, you are saying, we have possibilities. And I think hope is such an important thing to understand, because I think it's frequently confused with optimism. For me, optimism and pessimism are both arrogant, because they claim to predict the future, and we can't predict the future. We ought to know that better than ever. That's not what hope's about. 12th century philosopher Maimonides had a definition of hope, which was, hope is believing in the plausibility of the possible as opposed to the necessity of the probable. In other words, it's always probable Goliath will win, but sometimes David does. It was improbable we elect a black man president of my country in 2007. It happened. Hope is that place between fantasy and certainty. It's the domain of could be, of possibility, and that's precious. And so when you're mobilizing around hope, you're affirming people's capacity to make choices, to make a difference, and so you're actually, you're strengthening, excuse me, you're strengthening democratic capacity rather than just the opposite.
Water.
Thank you.
We apologize, we're missing a table. Let's switch from populism in America to populism in Ontario. And Olivia, we talked about our Premier, Doug Ford, last year, and empathy works in mysterious ways. Last year, you told us about finding common ground with Doug Ford. You've both experienced loss. He lost his late brother, Rob Ford. You lost your late husband, Jack Layton. And you talked about it. You came together, and I guess you built an empathy bridge, right? It's in the book, empathy bridges. So now a year later, it feels like that bridge is burning up a little bit. And okay, you're nodding no. And on bicycle lanes, for example, the bridge seems to be on fire. And he's bigfooting you, and he's warning you that he'll override you. So what happened to this relationship, this bridge that you built last year? Because you've been talking tough.
The bridges has some off-ramp and on-ramp. It has some bike lanes in it.
I feel like all we need now is a bypass.
It's a bypass, yes, exactly. Because of that bridge, we were able to upload the Garner and the DVP. As a result, we are now able to put in more money to build, to restore the community center. TDC is still, but at least we're investing. Our credit rating.
I saw that.
Marshall. Since the 70s, our credit rating has been falling. And for the first time since the 70s, what the heck is credit rating? It's how SP, Standard & Poor's actually measure how stable and how good your credit as an organization, as a government. So we actually went from AA to AA+. It's gone
Marshall,
up.
What's happened? She's talking credit ratings.
Well, why? Why?
He's
Because
boasting about it.
No, because that means we are able, that we will have more money to spend. We just did a debenture because you don't go and pay cash to buy a new subway cars, for example, right? You borrow some, you pay some down payment. But when you go and borrow some money, the interest you pay is lower. That means you save more money. You save that money, and then you can build more affordable housing and more community centers, right? You can have more after-school programs, feed more kids. So it's important. If your interest rate is so high because your credit rating is so low, that's not good. So the empathetic bridge actually resulted in a lot of agreement on how we could work together.
But is the honeymoon over? Because
the
you're now
off-ramp
more...
or the overpass, and is where the bike lane is. In the grand scheme of things, when we look at the challenges in front of us, building affordable housing, getting people moving, feeding kids in school, all of those things, huge. Bike lanes is important. It's one small piece of it. And will I be able to have an off-ramp and still be together? Hard to tell. But I was meeting with some of the local businesses where the premier had a press conference. And I looked at that road, and then we had a good 2 or 3 hours discussion with the small businesses in the area. And they said, well, that median, we may not need the median. Can you see if you can get rid of the median where there's some flowers and et cetera? Can you do that and then actually restore the car lanes and still have the bike lane? I said, okay, why not? So I'm getting our planners to do some diagrams to do some drawings, whether we can have, because the car is slowed down from anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes in that area. Well, maybe we could do something. We can do both. So
you found a middle way. You found on the median is your middle.
Yes, that's one way, because I think it's important to hear each other, see each other, and not always just butt heads. And yes, ideologically it's different, but if we can just take a look at the experience. One thing about Marshall's teaching is that if we connect through experience and not always fighting each other on opinions, because that's ideology, that if we can connect as human beings and do the experience, and this is what deep canvassing is about, is can we find, if you have the experience, I have the experience, let's connect with the experience and then find the common ground, find the core value, and then you can move ahead together.
So that worked a year ago. Now the premier seems a little more feisty.
Well,
and
he has the election that he's facing, you know.
So that's it's democracy. He has an election coming up, and there's more wedge issues, right? And you're sounding more exasperated and less empathetic. The other day, you were seeming like you'd.
However, having said that,
Here comes a pivot.
He comes to pivot, yes. I need him to be on side to help us deal with the drug crisis. I need drug treatment program. I need mental health support. We are paying 100% of the phenomenal new service that if you have a mental health crisis, if you have a friend that are experiencing mental health issues, and if he or she or they are not a danger to themselves, then call 211. Don't call 911. 211, we hired 200 people to come and help you, because it's all over the city. We will come and help you deal with the crisis, do the follow-up, refer you to the right kind of service. So the first response is care, not police officers that are not trained to do it. That I need his support. I need his support to build more affordable housing, to actually get TDC working properly. I need operating dollars for TDC. So those are big things. I need him to transfer the funds and invest in feeding more kids, because I want every kid under 18 to have a decent meal in school. It's based on hope, but I know we can do it. Those are the things we're going to do it together.
So, a couple of interesting themes there, and we need to go to questions just momentarily. But you talked about credit ratings. Credit rating agencies look mostly at whether politicians are willing to raise tax room to balance the budget. You defied conventional wisdom on the last election campaign by saying you were willing to raise taxes. Didn't want to be pinned down, but you did it. And my question, though, is to Marshall, pivoting here. So much of our politics today is no longer transformational of the kind that you want. It's transactional. It's Joe Biden saying, here's the deal. Donald Trump, the art of the deal. Doug Ford or Pierre Poilievre, our conservative leader and future prime minister perhaps, about axe the tax. Do you worry about that, or can you tell us how you can make politics more transformational when it is almost always now transactional?
Oh yeah, step one, no.
Five-step program.
No, come on, these are real questions. This may sound strange.
And I'm not distracted, I'm just looking at your questions. So.
This may seem strange, but I think some real insight on this question is in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, chapter 10, verse 16, when Jesus is sending his organizers, or they're called apostles, out to tell the story. I mean, it's a new story. It's the Gospel, it's a new story. And he says, if I'm to set you as sheep among wolves, you must be innocent as doves and wise as serpents. See, it takes both. It takes both. The values really matter. That's how we can connect. But understanding power also really matters. And it's not an either or, it's a both and. It's too easy to get off the hooks. Oh no, for me it's all just this. Oh, for me. Anytime somebody says it's all this, you can be sure they're wrong. Because the world is not made of abstract alls. The world is more complex. And that's one reason why values are so important as a foundation. Not as ideas, because values are feelings. Values is what we value. What actually, St. Augustine said, it's one thing to know the good, another to love it. Loving it is what enables action upon it. Knowledge doesn't equal action without motivation. And so that whole domain of real values, shared values experience, not as a cognitive exercise, but as an emotional experience. And you know, this thing about emotion, you know, it's like, get the emotion out of it. We need to be just, you know, very rational, calculating. Well, then you have a sociopath, because human beings make sense out of how they feel and what they feel with their bodies, what they feel with their hearts, what they understand. And so when you are going to be real about values, you're going to be speaking the language of emotion, the language of hope, the language of fear, of possibility. And that's so important to understand, because, you know, music speaks the language of emotion, right? You don't need words, it speaks the language. Worship does, theater does, poetry does. Narrative speaks the language of emotion about one particular thing. How is it that as humans we confront disruption, the unexpected, that for which we're not prepared? How do we find the resources to confront our fear with hope? How to avoid reacting fearfully, but rather to engage hopefully. And so we contrast response from reaction. And this question, how to deal with what we're not prepared for, it's a fundamental question all human beings have. That's why we're interested in stories, because identifying with the protagonist gives us the experience, not just the idea, but it's the emotional communication of the values that are drawn on to deal with that. So that kind of conversation is really important.
Olivia, you wanted to jump in.
I want to add in that I am having that conversation internally at City. City of Toronto has 43,000 staff. And I have, in my mayor's office, about 22, 23 staff. And I believe in learning and growing. And when you're looking at transformation, what we did yesterday, we have Professor Ganz to come and talk to and teach our senior manager, that are civil servants, about their relationship with the people they serve. That it doesn't have to be just transactional, that it's transformative. He asked the question, why are you a public servant? Why do you serve? Why are you working as a planner, a transportation manager, a communicator, you know, any number of staff? And he was asking the question of why. Why are you involved in public service? And your relationship with the people you serve out in, you know, the 3.2 million people they serve, how is it? So we are trying to do the, having the civil servants, having your local government in a place where it is not just transactional, you pay the taxes and I deliver the service. It's not just that. It's how do we create a better city together? And we're doing that through opening up the budget consultation. Last night I was at Scarborough
And you
Civic
talked about
Center.
that. You talked about that a year ago.
Yeah,
in fact.
exactly, and we did it. And at North York, at Scarborough, we have huge number of people engaged in not just hearing about a budget, in small group discussion. We brought in facilitators and asked them, what kind of service do you want? What kind of budget do you want? How do you want us to spend money together? What is your story? So by doing that, we're opening up City Hall. We're trying to create a place where people feel they have the agency, the power, to make the agency, such a Harvard word, how they could feel the power that they can have to make a difference. And last year, because many of them said, we want to build affordable housing, they were so adamant about the service they want. I thought, okay, I'll take a deep breath and have a tax increase and deliver the service we need. So it is not just a transactional, back to your question, I'm trying to, using the methodology or the pedagogy that I've learned into a transformative kind of service at City, so that our relationship with the people we serve are in a way that we empower the residents to tell us what they want and be able to feel that they have some control over their government. That's ultimately what democracy is about. It's not just about election, it's that in between, that they could actually democratically engage in their government, in this case, local government.
So thank you. for raising that, because democracy is also not just about pedagogy. Politics is about action, and that's part of your playbook and wheelhouse as well. Before I go to my next question, though, I have a confession. I'm not getting your questions on Slido. Are you all getting them on Slido? Are they showing up? Tanya, Catherine?
No one have any questions. Maybe that's it.
Are there no questions? It's not open.
This does not look like an
Okay.
unquestioning crowd.
This sounds like this
not
feels
at all.
so. This feels like a hostile takeover by the Democracy Forum. It means I'm going to have to keep asking emergency questions. So I
a
apologize
tech
for that,
takeover.
and I feel, Marshall, like your acolytes and students let you down by not shouting out earlier. We're not getting our Slido, so this is a class fail. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It's our failure. We apologize.
We can talk about how technology makes it harder for a transformational relationship.
I'll come to that in a second, though. That's on my list now that I have a little extra time. But I want to circle back to Olivia. You talked, first of all, in terms of questions, you remember last year at the end, we had about 300 or 400 questions that had been sent in by people, and I gave you the list. Do you have the answers?
Yeah, and they saw it from my action.
Okay, so we did hand it over, but we'll give you another year. Come back next year with the answers. A more serious question now. So we've talked a couple of times about people who are homeless. And you've now been in government for more than a year. And the other day, your team and some of your progressive allies announced that you don't have enough shelter space for hundreds, potentially thousands of people. How's that possible? You say your credit rating is up, you're able to raise taxes. This is something that can't wait. I know you're going to talk about affordable housing, as you did last year, as the ultimate solution. But in the meantime, people are in parks and in transit shelters, as we heard the other day, and the TTC says it can't cope anymore. You said the other day, I think with Doug Ford beside you, that people sleeping in parks is not okay because children can't use the playgrounds if they're near the encampments. What are you going to do, and when are you going to do it?
The second part of that press conference, I then said the solution. There are three ways. Number one is something called housing benefits. It's rent supplement. For $1,000 a month, you can actually help someone pay the rent and be able to rent a room, an apartment. Okay? The apartment would be more, but at least get off from the shelter into actual housing, permanent housing, okay? And we had a program until April 1st of this year, and then it stopped because the federal government and the provincial government is fighting to sign that agreement. 6 months later, they're still talking about it, and they finally signed it. In October, this program starts again. So every month, we could have housed 300 people into homes, okay, permanent homes. And that because the way the federal and the provincial government, if the federal government comes in and then they negotiate and they have to sign an agreement and then later on we got the money. So housing benefits, rent supplement is one way, right? Because it's $1,000 a month, we can do that. Second way is build shelters. But building shelters, we're building 8 shelters. It doesn't go like that. You can't just build shelter. We are building shelters. We put the capital budget, we're building it. But it's not built yet. Number 3.
Well, how long do people have to wait? Can you not do something that's a standby measure, a transitional measure? At some point,
Where are we going to put them? They're already in hotels. They are in hotels. All the hotels are full. Okay? Shelters are full. What we're doing now, and I see Sasiko here, what we're doing now is looking for houses. So Matthew House, Romario House. These are just think about this. Last time I was here, there were 3,000 refugees in our shelter. It's now 6,000 refugees. Half of our shelters are refugees. Where do we put them? Okay? And the way the numbers is growing is just phenomenal. We now have 12,000 people in our shelter each night. It's dramatic increases. So we can't build them fast enough, and we don't have enough funds for rent supplement. We'll keep putting rent supplement in, but what we're doing is to say to refugees serving agencies, to say, please help us. Go rent a house and rent something, we will provide support and funding to all the nonprofit agencies so that they can help out to build, to shelter those refugees. So those are three ways: working with nonprofit groups, paying for rent supplements, because it's $7,000 per month if we rent hotels. If we just
I'm not saying that emergency shelters are efficient or a long
No.
I'm talking about not waiting another year.
No,
but
I know, but
you mean
but
stayed by
shelter.
Slido. So
But supplement, yeah, I figure I'm giving you time. But providing rent supplement is it's
I understand.
really worth it. And also, there's a security. It's no longer a shelter; it's their home. They could actually cook their food and be able to form communities. And it doesn't have to be just one. If 3 or 4 refugees come together and rent an apartment, then there's community, which means that they're able to settle in a lot faster.
Okay,
So those are the 3 ways that we could do more.
You're
But
about to be you're out of time. You're about to be saved by Slido. Before I dig in, though, I did promise I would circle back to Marshall, and we'll keep you in overtime for a few minutes. Because we've negotiated this in advance, so I will hold you to it in your chair. Marshall, we talked about money politics a couple of minutes ago, and we could spend another 2 hours on that. But we did have the U.S. ambassador to Canada here in our last Democracy Forum a couple of weeks ago. He's the ambassador because he's a great fundraiser. That's how it works. You always send your top fundraisers to Canada as a patronage appointment. And he was very honest about it, very candid, and very, very critical of money politics. But he said we can't engage in unilateral disarmament. We got to raise money because that's what they're doing. I mean, Elon Musk is at it pretty fast. So it's $4 billion for a presidential campaign. It's $14 billion if it's all in for congressional races, and that's in US dollars, by the way. So they don't use Canadian dollars in American fundraising. As I said earlier, though, the Democrats are even better at raising the fundraising. But here's my question. In your book, and I have it now, buy the book, you worry about how rich donors can also distort philanthropy, not just politics, and organizing, because the organizers become accountable to the donors and not to the members or the volunteers. I'm going to just quote a little bit. We've got to give the book a bit of time as well. You talk about how fundraising, quote, corrupts the craft of organizing. This might sound familiar to a lot of people who are active in NGOs. The outsized influence of donors shifts the locus of accountability from one's people to one's funders. And by the way, the Dais and the Democracy Forum are not opposed to donors, but so feel free. But you do worry that you end up with money-based power rather than people-based power. And one last quote, because you had to use this word, you talk about the philanthropic colonization of civil society. So that's even before Elon Musk. So talk about money politics and talk about money organizing.
I'm glad you didn't ask me to contribute solutions to housing or immigration.
I was tempted to, because in the book, you talk about how in 1964 in Mississippi, it's about racism, but the biggest fallout from racism was a housing crisis, and that was 60 years ago.
Oh, here we are again.
Here we are again.
Yeah.
Okay. We have some real problems in the States. All right. One we talked about is turning politics into a marketing business. And it takes the people out. And it just makes it sales and radical individualization when politics is supposed to be about engagement. Now, on the other side, a couple things happen. One is that we did a whole project on the Sierra Club, and we found that at a certain point, chapter growth at the local level had led membership. Then things shifted, and membership went ahead of chapter growth. Why? Direct mail. Direct mail enabled the national to go direct on a scale not available to the local, and both raise money and make members in that way. All of a sudden, the locals, they didn't depend on the locals anymore. In fact, the locals would be objects of subvention, they called, rather than the other way around. So the professionalization and centralization of advocacy was one element. The other element is then the emergence of all this wealth, which is a function of the inequality. And then, you know, I mean, people who have a lot of wealth have various reasons for wanting to. I mean, I have to say, philanthropy in the U.S. means tax exemption because you're giving money to a 501c3. Those also ghettoize activists because it takes them out of partisan politics, puts them into this ghetto of nonpartisanship, which is kind of self-delusion. I mean, that's not really how things work. Yeah, thank you. So then, and you know, philanthropists have many motives. Certainly looking good might be one of them. And so all of a sudden, civic organizations get replaced by NGOs. And see, NGOs, there's nothing democratic about them. They are nonprofit firms. There's a board up here. It's governed by wealth for the most part. It's delegated to a CEO, whatever, and then everything's delegated downward. And it runs like a firm. And so, I mean, that's fine, but to claim that that's in any way has anything to do with democracy is foolishness.
Because you have this fragmentation also, because you have vanity philanthropy as well.
Oh, yeah.
Where you have just tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of charities. And so it just fragments. But that's fascinating about direct mail. So by you effectively direct mail disenfranchise the franchisees at the local level. Okay, let's go to.
Unless it's a charity that teach Marshall Ganz methodology of organizing, like the Institute for Change Leaders. I thought I would just throw in a plug there.
Nothing's black and white.
That's the takeaway from the book. Okay, let's go to Slido, and good question, it's at the top. So we're being democratic here, most votes. I've often heard political staffers at City Hall say that organizing is great for the campaign, but not for governing. How does it matter after Election Day?
Well, it's even more important because you want the local people to be engaged and understand the inner workings of City Hall so that they could be part of the solutions, right? So when you're looking at bus routes, where are the bus routes? What should it be? How should it, what, if you want to build housing, where do you build the housing? How do you build it? How high, how tall? Community services, after-school programs, parks and recreation program. If I just send in a parks recreation specialist to come into a neighborhood and say, I think your kids should learn how to play baseball and learn to swim, and that. But in the neighborhood, they said, no, we like to play cricket, not baseball. Excuse me, you know, that's what. So you have to, or in this park, we need a lot more benches here. We need to animate a community garden. So it's really organizing some of the residents to say, this is what our park should look like. This is, if I have a community center, these are the programs that should be part of the community center, the offering for my kids, or the kids would actually say. So right now in the middle, we have a parks and recreation master plan organized. So you could actually go on the website and say, in my area, this recreation program works for me, this recreation is not working for me, and I need more of this, and I need more cricket pitches, and etc. And that takes organizing. And it takes people getting over the thing, yeah, City Hall is over there and we have no say. And we're saying, no, that's totally not true. And that takes a lot of work. So my team is organizing me in front of subway stations. Every few weeks you see your mayor in front of a subway station for an hour or two and saying, hey, what kind of things do you want? Is this bus coming in the right time? Too much bunching? What's the problem? And that takes organizing, too.
I have to say that I admire all politicians for risking their careers to people they don't know in elections. But I especially admire municipal politicians, all of them, because they have to adjudicate these competing demands. And they don't have a playbook, an ideological playbook to rely on all the time to spout out the answers. So it is difficult. Okay, here's another question. The second most popular question on Slido is, can you see this question? So yes, Slido is working. That's democracy. The next question that's anonymous, but it's a good question. Jackie De Silva asks, how do we, apparently anticipating, because it was before you even answered this, it anticipated your answer, how do we combat government making decisions based on a small group who have a big megaphone, demanding actions that don't serve the majority of people?
Organize the majority of the people.
Okay, good answer, Marshall.
So that's what democracy is about, right? Not people that are the loudest, but people that sometimes, because they work 3 shifts, or they speak different languages, or they can't get to City Hall, whatever the reason might be, or even just feel they don't have a say, well, you need to encourage them to come out. We actually went to the Toronto community housing, like government housing. We're a landlord of like 100,000 residents. They live in rent-geared to income housing. We went and had a training with the tenant organizers, their staff, and the tenants' leaders, their volunteers. We put them in a place where we talk about self, us, now, their narrative. Why are they involved in organizing tenants? And that actually, because they are often the ones, because they think they're in government housing, quote government housing, that they feel that no one listens to them. And that is why the first place we went to is the tenant organizers, the tenant leaders, to say to them, how can we assist you to be even more effective? How do you tell your stories? How do you bring more of your tenants, your neighbors, to come out? So that is, those are the ones that we need to hear from time to time.
Let me just say something.
Go ahead.
Let me say something about power. Because in a way, that is what we're talking about. And it's one of those words that people head off in the other direction, maybe because people have a lot of it and don't want us to talk about it too much. But I think it's important to understand that power is not something you have. And I'll be clear. If you need what I've got more than I need what you've got, who's got the power? If you need what I've got more than I need what you've got, who's got the power, me or you?
You.
And if it's reversed, who's got the power? See, power is an influence created through interdependence. And when that interdependence is aligned in terms of shared interest, we can create capacity like credit unions, co-ops. That gives us more capacity, more power. On the other hand, when someone holds resources that we need to meet our needs, and we don't have resources they need, then often their will replaces ours, and their agenda replaces ours, and we wind up. So the challenge is understanding that interdependence and how it works. And that's so fundamental, because it's an influence created that way. And so there's a saying, another Mexican saying here, al nopal no se viene a ver solo cuando tiene tuna, which means people don't come and look at the prickly pear cactus except when it's bearing fruit.
Say that again? What?
Al nopal no, people don't come and look at the prickly pear cactus except when it's bearing fruit. And this is used to describe the visits of politicians to the barrios just before elections. Ooh, there's a lot of fruit here. Let's go, let's go. Election over, no more fruit. Now, the thing is, and they don't reappear, typically. I know it's the exception here, but typically that can happen. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's an interdependent relationship between organized community and public officials that is necessary, that kind of interdependence, because that's where accountability comes from, it's where engagement comes from. Sometimes people talk a lot about participation as if that in itself was democratic. But participation without governance, there's nothing democratic about it. It's just like, hey, we got a lot of people showing up. And with all due respect to the Catholic Church, it was very, very powerful on participation, but not so much on governance. So how we put those together, I think, makes for a healthy civil society and a healthy politics. But it's not hiding away from that stuff, but it's recognizing it, engaging with it, and not saying, ooh, politics, I don't like that.
Marshall, the most powerful march is the march of time. We're almost out of time, both of you.
Very good. Yeah, that's
the
good.
mayor has the power here, and her team does at least. So a quick question, though, really quick. Quick question. You quote a student in the book as saying, and it could have come maybe from anyone in the room, I feel over-connected but under-committed.
Yeah.
We don't have time to talk about organizing online, but I just want to hear a quick take from both of you about online organizing versus offline. How to learn to love Zoom, and also just about the different platforms. I mean, Facebook has 3 billion people. Maybe they're not organized, but they do play on it. Instagram has like 2 billion people. TikTok has 1 billion people, and it's all TikTok. Twitter has only, or X, has only 300 million people. But a quick word from both of you on platforms and online.
Let me say something about that, because there's a big difference between transaction and relationship.
Yep.
See, so much of our lives are now transactions. It's in the moment, it's just for the present, and that's what it is. And, you know, I don't know, have you ever been somewhere where you say, ooh, I just got networked? You ever? See, because you were viewed as a resource, not as another human. And so the presence of people to one another is fundamental. The critical element in continuity and relationship is, let's say you have coffee with somebody, you have a great conversation, and you say, let's get together again in 2 weeks, and so we can continue. They say, oh, I got exams in 2 weeks. What about a week after that? Oh, I got people coming from out of town. What about a week after that? Why don't I send you an email? See, in sociological terms, you just got dumped. That's what happened, okay? Now, and see, the difference is the exchange was there, but the commitment to continue the exchange was not there. The commitment to the other person. Because when you commit to others, that creates then the possibility for growth, for learning, for development, and all the rest. When it's pure transaction, it's all just about now, there's no future to it. And so that kind of world of transaction, see, online makes it so easy to pretend that a transaction's relationship, it's not.
In person, though, Marshall has transacted you and shortchanged you. You have a little bit of time left.
I got one more thing I want to say about this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, which is that online you can do this because seeing another person's face is so different than not. So it's a choice. Do we use this technology to strengthen our capacity to work together and build relationships or not? Or do we blame the technology for the way in which we're using the technology to dehumanize one another?
Madam Mayor?
His last
word.
part, actually, I was just going to say that it's a technology. It's how you use the platform. And it could be very creative, but it can also be transformative. But ultimately, it's hard to replace face-to-face. But we know through Zoom, and Marshall teach through Zoom, and you can, with small group discussion, you know, you can still do the very intimate conversation. It's how you use it, what's for what purpose. So we can't just blame technology. Now, the social media is addictive because it's
Yes. Oh, yeah.
programmed to be addictive. The key thing is to understand what is our relationship with it so that we don't get off-ramped, back to the bridge, so that we are still doing that empathetic bridge, still connecting with each other. Those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, the empathetic bridge, I'm leaving that for you. It's a hanging thing for you to, you know, read it and learn it, because having that bridge, it's the technology that can assist us, or that we use it as a clutch and not do the kind of hard work to connect with each other, because connecting with each other is hard work. And on that one, I have to run off.
Time to disconnect, yes.
Thank you, but you can keep conversation.
We'll thank you after you've left. So,
Okay.
so thank you, and we end that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's just, that was great improvisation by Olivia. In my next life, I want to come back as a tour director, and I love the quick meet and greet and run. but she was here. She gave us extra time, so I want to thank her for that. One last message for everyone in the room is that I always remind people a vote is a terrible thing to waste. There are elections coming up soon, so use it or lose it. A programming note, we have 3 of Canada's top labor leaders coming to our next Democracy Forum. Not your typical union brothers. They're not out of central casting. Unifor's Lana Payne, the CLC's B. Brusk, and OPSU's JP Hornick. That's on October 30th at 1 p.m., and you can register in advance. You'll get the cues as you're going out the door. And I would just want to thank, pretend she's here, Mayor Olivia Chow, coming back to TMU, and a special thanks to Marshall Ganz for telling us about his new book. Buy the book. People, Power, Change, Organizing for Democratic Renewal. Actually, now that she's left, we don't have to rush. We can spend another hour here if you want. Thanks to everyone in the audience for being so democratic. Merci, Megwach, and thank you. Kareem, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Marshall. A few thank yous from us here at the dais and the Institute for Change Leaders. First, thank you to Mohamed Lashemi, Roberta Inachito Provenzano, and John McRitchie, who helped make the work that we do at the dais possible. Thank you so much to Mike Perry at the Institute of Change Leaders, our co-organizers for this event. And Mike will have a few words about what's going to happen next. I want to thank the staff and team at TMU Eats, TMU Security, the AV team led by Brian Bose, who's behind the pillar there. All the daisies, the folks in the white sweatshirts or others who work at the dais, they are daisies, and they are led in these efforts by Catherine Embergi. I want you to get out your phone. So we had a critique of technology, but I wanted you to get out your phone, dais.ca, and there's a talks tab there, and you can actually register right now for the TMU Democracy Forum, Labor's New Leadership that Martin mentioned. Also, the next day on that event is Wednesday the 30th at 1 p.m. On Thursday the 31st, which is Halloween, we have our next TMU, our next dais book talk with Denise Hearn and Vas Bednar, Corporate Tricks or Treats, The Big Fix, How Companies Capture Markets and Harm Canadians, and we're encouraging attendees to dress up as their favorite monopoly. A monopoly industry, and you may be familiar with some of those, and that'll be at the dais on Halloween at noon. Please, while your phones are out, you can notice dais.ca events or talks, and you can sign up for these events. And once again, the donate tab is there. I also wanted to, just before you leave the stage, Marshall, and Olivia, the mayor, has gone, but I want to, Christina Cassin, who is here from Ottawa, I noticed in the crowd. And Christina, Olivia and I were your students. Christina was our student, and Christina is now making change in lots of ways as a DAIS alumni, and now at the now in Ottawa and the Masters of Political Management program. So I just want to say thank you, Christina, and just to show you that the work continues. And now I'll throw it to Mike. Thank you so much, Marshall. This is just the beginning for a lot of folks today. We've got a leadership training happening starting at 2, and I'll throw it to Mike for that.
Thanks so much, Karim. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Tanishi, kia wao. I think one of the themes here is we're stronger together. So I want to thank the dais as Executive Director of the Institute for Change Leaders, Marshall, and our mayor, known only as Olivia, together, building power. A few of our board members from ICL are here, Cindy Alexander and Liz Harvey, and our amazing facilitators and coaches are here as well. So just what's going to happen next, there's a tradition, of course, when we hear a great presentation, a lot of times how we show our appreciation is not simply to applaud, but to echo more. So if you'd like to hear more from Marshall, can we hear a little bit more?